Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. You know, we take
Hey,
stacks and stacks of research
stacks and
and
stacks.
we turn it into knowledge you can actually use. Today, we're going to be looking at the case of Lucy Letby.
Oh, yeah.
And she was a neonatal nurse,
Right.
but ultimately was convicted of multiple murders and attempted murders
Of the infants.
of infants under her care. So we're going to unpack that.
Yeah. I think the setting is really what gets me about this. I mean,
Yeah.
you think of crimes, you think dark alleys, you think, I don't know, something out of a movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is a neonatal unit.
Right.
This is where you have the most vulnerable beginnings of life.
Right.
And you have parents who are trusting these medical professionals to care for their newborns.
Right.
So the contrast is pretty striking, right?
Well, and I think a lot of people really struggled with that because the Countess of Chester Hospital, where
Yeah.
she worked, seemed to be, from all of our sources, a good hospital doing really good work. And Letby was, described as exemplary.
Mm-hmm. Dedicated, generous,
Souls caring.
a model nurse.
So how do you reconcile that?
Yeah. It's a real head scratcher.
Yeah.
And I think probably a lot of the doctors who worked alongside her
Right.
probably just, their minds couldn't go there for a while.
And it wasn't just one incident.
No, that's right.
It was like from 2015 to 2016, there was this spike in infant deaths and collapses.
Sudden crises.
Yeah. And even in a neonatal unit where, the stakes are so high.
Yeah, where things happen.
Things happen. Yeah. This was beyond like the normal.
Beyond the pale.
Right.
And so I think that's where that unease starts.
Right.
Right? Because doctors, they're driven to figure out what is going on.
Yeah.
So they're looking at, is it environmental? Is it the equipment?
Is it an infection?
Right.
What is
Yeah.
going on?
Right. But it just kept happening.
Right.
And there was this, this correlation that started to emerge.
Yeah, it was with her shifts.
Well, it was, yeah. Lucy Letby's shifts.
Like it's like a medical thriller, but this is real life.
This is the stuff, yeah. This is real life stuff.
Yeah.
Pretty scary stuff.
Yeah. So what did the hospital do when how did they respond to this?
I mean, they did what you would hope they would do.
Yeah.
They started an internal review.
Okay.
They're looking at trends, trying to figure out, okay, what's going on here.
Right.
But as the suspicions mounted, obviously, then the stakes are getting higher.
So then the police got involved?
Yeah. Cheshire Police Department
Mm-hmm.
got brought in 2017.
Okay.
And they're conducting a really thorough investigation.
Right.
They're looking at all the medical records. They're looking at the hospital logs, stat schedules. They're interviewing everyone, trying to figure out, okay, what happened?
Right. So it goes from, okay, what's wrong with the system? Or is there some sort of environmental factor that we need to address to, oh, wait a minute, there might be an individual here that we need to look at?
Uh-huh. And I think one of the turning points is the forensic analysis that they did of the infant medical records.
Okay.
Because that's where they found the methods.
Like air injection?
Air injections.
Yeah.
Excessive milk or insulin.
And tampering with the feeding tubes?
Yeah.
Like that's not just an accident.
No, that points to something more sinister.
Right.
So I imagine that sent shockwaves through the hospital, through the community.
I mean, how do you process that if you're working there?
I can't imagine.
Yeah. So she was arrested in 2018
That's right.
for the first time.
Questioned by police.
Right.
And then released on bail while the investigation continues.
Right. Because it was complicated.
Very complicated. Sensitive case.
So
But that's not the end of the story.
we're going to get to that in part 2.
That's right. The trial really brings things into focus.
Yeah.
So we'll look at that next time. But I'll leave you with the image of the Countess of Chester Hospital. A place of hope, a place of new beginnings, but also the setting for something unthinkable.
All right. We'll be back in part 2.
Yeah, the trial really brings things to sharp focus, doesn't it?
Yeah, because now we're not talking about, an investigation. We're talking about, did she do it or didn't she?
Right, and the prosecution had to prove that Letby had intentionally harmed these infants.
Right. Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right, exactly.
This is hard.
It is. Especially in a case like this.
So what were some of their key arguments?
Well, I mean, one of the things is the sheer number of incidents.
Right.
Right, and this distinct pattern that emerged.
Right.
We're not talking about a handful of cases.
Yeah.
Right? It's multiple infants, all of whom had been stable and even improving.
Right.
And then they suddenly collapse or die during Letby's shifts.
Right.
And so the prosecution actually brought in statistical experts.
Wow.
Who testified the probability of this happening naturally was just astronomically low.
Like it wasn't just a coincidence.
Right. It just defied explanation.
It seems like from what we're seeing, the timing was really important
Oh, absolutely.
to the prosecution's case.
It established this very clear link.
But they had to prove that she had the means and the opportunity to do this.
Right. And so the forensic analysis
Okay.
really came into play.
So what did that show?
Well, I mean, it provided this really concrete scientific evidence.
Okay.
Right? So, for instance, in some infants, they found evidence of air injections, okay, which cause air embolisms, which are basically air bubbles that block blood flow.
Right.
And that can be fatal.
Especially to these little tiny babies.
Especially to fragile newborns.
Right.
Other babies had been given excessive amounts of milk or insulin.
Right.
Leading to these severe complications that just could not be explained by natural causes.
Right.
And in some cases, there were even signs of tampering with feeding tubes.
It's just so, like, the level of, I don't even know what the word is.
Yeah, calculated.
Calculated. Like, it's just...
Yeah.
So, I mean, she had to say something, right?
Right. So throughout the trial, Letby consistently denied any wrongdoing.
Okay.
Okay. So her defense team, they vigorously challenged the prosecution's evidence.
Right.
And they presented their own arguments to try and create that reasonable doubt.
Right.
And their argument was basically that the deaths and the collapses were due to natural causes.
Okay.
So they pointed to potential underlying health issues in the infants.
Okay.
Or they suggested that there were broader systemic failings within the hospital.
So they were trying to say it's not her.
It's not her, exactly.
It's a hospital.
It's the hospital's fault. They're trying to shift the blame
Right.
away from Letby.
So did they have any, like, specific examples?
Yeah, they pointed to things like potential hygiene issues,
Okay.
staffing shortages, maybe inadequate training.
Right.
Suggesting that the hospital's cutting corners.
Right.
And that Letby was being unfairly singled out for these broader problems.
Right. And, I mean, neonatal units are dealing with the most fragile little humans.
Absolutely. And they did make the point that, neonatal units, by their very nature, deal with incredibly fragile infants.
Right.
And that, some level of mortality, while tragic, is inevitable.
Right.
And so they were saying that the prosecution was oversimplifying a complex situation.
Right.
And overlooking those crucial factors.
Yeah, trying to muddy the water a little bit.
Yeah, create that doubt.
But there's the notes.
The handwritten notes that investigators found.
In her house.
When they searched her home,
This is a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Because now you're getting into her head.
Exactly.
So what was in them?
So some of the notes were just really innocuous.
Like her to-do list?
Yeah, like work schedule, social life, just personal reflections.
Right.
But then there were others that had these phrases.
Oh, no.
That were much more troubling.
Okay.
Even self-incriminating.
Okay.
Like expressing guilt and self-blame.
Okay.
Things like, I am evil. I did this.
Oh, my gosh.
And so the prosecution was arguing that these notes provided this window into Letby's psyche.
Right.
And that she was aware of her actions and the harm she had caused.
Yeah. How do you come back from that?
Right. Well, the defense, they had an uphill battle for sure.
Right.
They argued that the notes were just the ramblings of a distressed and overwhelmed nurse.
Okay.
Someone who was unfairly burdened by the deaths.
Right.
Struggling to cope.
Right.
Taking on the guilt and blame for events that were beyond her control.
So basically, again, not her fault.
Not her fault. Right.
Just a poor, overwhelmed nurse.
Exactly. So it really became this battle of interpretations.
Right.
Right. The prosecution saying, hey, this is a confession.
Right.
This shows her guilt.
Yeah.
The defense saying, no, this is just an innocent woman, overwhelmed by grief.
Right.
Unjustly accused.
And so the jury had to decide.
They did.
Yeah.
It was a complex, emotionally charged case. Yeah. But in August of 2023, Lucy Letby was found guilty.
Wow.
On 7 counts of murder.
Wow.
And 6 counts of attempted murder.
Oh, my gosh.
And she was given a whole life order.
Which means?
Which means she will spend the rest of her life in prison.
Without the possibility of parole?
Without the possibility of parole.
Wow.
The most severe punishment.
I mean, it makes sense considering what she did, but it's so hard to imagine what those families went through.
Unimaginable.
Yeah.
And I think the impact of Letby's crimes really goes way beyond those immediate victims and their families.
Right, because you just inherently trust the healthcare system.
You do.
Yeah.
You're conditioned to trust these people.
Right.
And so when that trust is shattered, it really raises these fundamental questions about our systems of care.
Yeah, like what can we do? What can we learn from this? So we'll get to that in part 3.
Absolutely. We'll delve into the aftermath of the verdict, the investigations, and the lasting impact this case has had on patient safety and trust in healthcare.
Yeah. I mean, this
Right.
case really, it really captured the world's attention, you know?
Yeah, and it's understandable, right? I mean, it's not just a crime. It's really a betrayal of trust.
It is, yeah.
And it happened in a place where people are supposed to feel safe.
Right. It makes you question everything.
You start to question everything, right? It's like,
Mm.
how can this happen in a hospital,
Yeah.
in a neonatal unit?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people felt, I mean, I know from reading the source material that people were just outraged.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The public outcry was immense. I mean,
Mm.
people wanted answers. They wanted to know how this could have gone undetected for so long.
Yeah. Were there warning signs? Did the hospital miss something?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of calls for independent inquiries.
Right. Like a deep dive.
Yeah, a deep dive into what went wrong, both at the hospital and within the NHS as a whole.
So did the hospital respond to that?
They did. They launched an independent inquiry to look into everything.
To figure out, okay, where did the system break down?
Yeah. Was it a failure of communication? Were there policies that weren't followed?
And a lot of people questioned whether the hospital responded quickly enough to the initial concerns.
Absolutely. Some doctors had raised red flags early on.
But it took time for those concerns to be taken seriously.
And that's the really heartbreaking part, right? Because you have to wonder if some of those babies could have been saved.
Yeah. So what changes were made after all of this?
Well, for one thing, the NHS implemented stricter guidelines for neonatal units across the country.
To try and prevent this from happening again.
Exactly. Things like enhanced monitoring systems, more thorough background checks for staff, and mandatory training on recognizing and reporting abuse.
So it's like they tried to close all the loopholes.
Yeah, they tried to create a multi-layered approach to patient safety.
And what about the healthcare workers themselves? Like, imagine going through that experience as a colleague of Letby's.
It must have been devastating for them.
I mean, talk about a loss of trust.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And the NHS recognized that they needed to provide support for these staff members.
Yeah, they needed counseling and support to process everything.
And that's an important step, right? Recognizing the emotional toll that something like this takes.
It's not just about policies and procedures, it's about the people.
Exactly.
But this case also raises a bigger question, doesn't it? Like, how do you balance the need for vigilance with the trust that's so important in healthcare?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
We can't operate from a place of constant suspicion, right? Assuming that everyone's a potential threat.
Right. That would create a culture of fear.
But at the same time, we can't be naive. We have to be aware of the possibility of abuse.
And be willing to speak up if we see something that seems wrong.
Exactly. We have to find that balance between trust and accountability.
And that's something we all have to think about, not just those in healthcare.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the Letby case is a reminder that evil can exist anywhere, even in the places we consider most sacred.
So it's up to all of us to be vigilant, to trust our instincts, and to speak up if we see something that doesn't feel right.
And to continue to demand better safeguards and accountability within our systems.
Well, that brings our deep dive into the case of Lucy Letby to a close. It's a complicated case with a lot of layers, and I hope this is giving you some new insights and maybe even some food for thought.
It's a case that will stay with us for a long time, and hopefully it will continue to drive positive change in the way we approach healthcare and patient safety.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this video and want to dive deeper into more cases like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like the video if you found the story compelling, and share it with your friends and family who might be interested in true crime and mysteries. By subscribing, you'll stay up to date with all our latest content and join a growing community of curious minds exploring the most fascinating cases. Click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything.